There are over 70 operators in Rainbow Six Siege, most of them having their uses across the board. But over Siege's lifetime as a game, some of these operators were almost completely useless. In today's video, I've gathered the top 7 most useless operators in Rainbow Six Siege history. The first of which is actually Blackbeard. Don't get me wrong, the Blackbeard we have now is far from useless. He's actually considered to be one of the best attackers in the game, but it wasn't always this way. Before Blackbeard's rework in Operation Collision Point, Blackbeard was the worst attacker in the game. Before we get into that though, you have to know about Blackbeard when he first dropped, because he was even more powerful than he is now. When he first dropped, he could absorb entire magazines with a bulletproof shield, but not a shield that went in front of your body. Instead, it was a shield that went in front of your face. This is overpowered because it meant you couldn't get a headshot at all, and this shield may have been breakable, but with the amount of health it had, it might as well have been invincible. Ubisoft nerfed him, and then nerfed him again, and again, and again. By the time Year 4 rolled around, Blackbeard players had about 0.5 seconds of protection before their shield cracked like an eggshell. What made him useless wasn't just the paper-thin shield, it was the fact that everything else about him was mediocre. No explosives, no utility, no real entry potential. All you got was a slow rifleman who died just like anyone else, only slower and sadder. Blackbeard overall was completely useless. His entire identity as an operator was completely gone, and the thing that made him stick out, his rifle shield, was useless, and you almost never got to use it anyways. Someone else who used to be completely useless but is way better now is the next operator on this list, which is Grim. Grim arrived with a lot of hype. A tactical swarm launcher that could track defenders and force them into bad positions sounds awesome. Problem was, Grim's gadget was way too easy to counter. The bees didn't slow their enemies. They didn't do damage, they just floated there, hoping someone would stay inside their radius like an idiot. Every smart defender just took one step out, and that was that. No lasting intel, no true area denial, just a flashy, hey, the enemy was here like 3 seconds ago, notification. Grim became a prime example of an operator that sounded great on paper, but failed miserably in real matches. Not only was the information on his gadget almost completely useless, but it was also hard to use in the first place. His gadget came on a launcher, like Tachanka's fire or Raora's doors. This meant that you had to stand still in front of enemies to get information on them, which often ended up in you dying. Back in the day as well, he didn't have the firing mode switch that allowed you to bounce your bees off of surfaces, meaning wherever you shot them is where they went. He also had less bees, and the pinging off of them was less useful and sensitive as they are now. Overall, he was just a way undertuned version of what we have now. Grim back then was an F-tier attacker, almost as bad as Blackbeard. Grim's story ended well though, as now he stands as one of the best attackers in the game for competitive play or in coordinated 5-stacks. The same exact thing can be said for the next operator on this list, which is Sens. Sens has one job: create walls of light to block sight lines. In theory, a way to control space, cut off angles, and enable pushes. In practice, the walls rolled randomly, bounced off of objects, and left giant gaps defenders could easily peek through. Instead of creating tactical opportunities, Sens' gadget often just caused confusion for their own team. Teammates couldn't see, defenders just waited for openings, and if you brought explosives or bulletproof gadgets, Sens' walls were basically worthless. The idea was cool, the execution though was a disaster. When Sens was released, the hitbox of their gadget was very clunky, not often allowing it to go under or through certain gaps it should have easily been able to go through or rolled through. If you combine that with the visible throw trajectory not being invented yet, Sens' gadgets were completely unpredictable in what they'd do or where they'd go. There were also a lot of counters to Sens back in the day. Warden, for one, countered Sens immediately and was also a meta pick for most people. Not only this, but explosions countered Sens, and so did mute jammers, EMP bursts, or catching devices like Wamai and Jaeger. Not to mention on release, you weren't able to activate or deactivate the walls remotely, meaning that when you rolled the walls down, you had to push before the timer ran out, and you couldn't plan your push because the walls only lasted a certain amount of time. This made Sens, just like Grim, way too hard to use for such little value when you used them.
Oh, okay. Oh, Legion could just see me, but I was on the other side of the wall. This is why Sens sucks, man. My arm was probably sticking through there, and he can see me clear as day, but obviously I can't see anything because the Sens is in the way.
But just like Grim, Sens has seen major changes to their kit, allowing for them to become a meta pick for competitive play or situationally viable for stacks that are coordinated. Arguably the most balanced the operator could have been, and the best state they've ever been in the first place. The same cannot be said for the next attacker on this list, which is Alibi. Alibi on release sounded amazing. Deploy holograms, mess with attackers, and punish trigger-happy players. In reality, her gadget might trick someone once, usually like a brand new player who didn't know better, and after the first week, Alibi prisms became about as threatening as a coat rack. Competitive players, they didn't shoot them. They just checked angles properly through a drone or ignored the prisms completely. Her gadget didn't delay pushes, it didn't gather meaningful intel, and it barely even created hesitation after people figured her out. Alibi's saving grace was her MX4 Storm SMG, a beautiful gun with an insane fire rate. She was also used occasionally for her deployable shield in the utility meta, or for her 1.5 times scope in the TDM meta. Never, though, for her ability. But why? Well, first of all of her clones looked the exact same, no matter the skin that you had equipped. This meant that her clones were always her default skin, so people got used to seeing that exact default skin and would always assume it was a clone. Not only this, but Alibi's clones would always be ADS with iron sights and no weapon skins, making the clones even easier to see. Clones also have this metal arm at the feet of the clone that are a dead giveaway that it's not a real operator. Combine this with the fact that if you did shoot a clone, nothing bad ever really happened anyway, and Alibi was and still is completely useless, which is almost the case for this next operator on the list being Amaru, the grappling hook entry specialist. The idea was to hit defenders with a fast, unexpected flank through windows or hatches, but that's not how it goes ever. Amaru's entry is so loud and so predictable that defenders just aim at the window and wait. Using her Gara hook is like setting off an air raid siren. Everyone knows where you're coming from and they'll be ready for it. Instead of flanking, you deliver yourself straight into a firing squad. Smart Amaru players eventually realize the tragic truth. The best way to play Amaru was to not use her gadget at all. Just walk around like a normal operator or use her gadget off-site, which makes no sense most of the time anyway. Otherwise, you're basically giving defenders a free kill, which not only does not benefit your team, but actually hinders them quite a bit.
I mean, this is a bad idea, but we're gonna go for it, dude. So obvious!
Not much has changed about Amaru besides slight buffs to her gadget and loadout, all of which have made her slightly situational at best, and she's still the risky operator she once was on release. Someone a lot less risky that was a lot less useful back in the day though was Rook. In a game about strategy, adaptability, and creativity with operator abilities, Rook's job was to drop a bag on the floor. That's it. His armor vest gave players slightly more health if they got downed, but in most cases if you were downed in Siege, you were dead anyway. Rook became a pick for people who wanted to feel helpful without actually doing much during the round. No gadgets to manage, no cameras, no area denial, just a passive buff. Great for beginners, but horrible for high-level coordinated play. The sad truth, old Rook didn't win you rounds. He just slightly delayed your death sometimes. You see, Rook armor back in the day was a lot more useless, especially compared to now. Back then, it allowed you to take more damage, but that was it. There was no extra health, and there was no self-revive, just extra damage reduction. When you compare that to operators like Jaeger, Bandit, or Azami, you can see why Rook back in the day was considered useless and would be useless if he was in the game today. Even in high-level competitive play, Rook with the buffs presently is still never played, which is why I put him as one of the most useless operators in Rainbow Six Siege history. To be fair though, compared to the past, Rook does have a place. He's consistently been the most high win rate defender for the high ranks and for the past 2 years. In solo queue ranked, especially for newer players, he's definitely still a great defender, so he's not quite as useless as he once was, but definitely not good for the average or above average player. The exact same thing can be said about the final operator in today's video, which is Tachanka. Now, if you think that Tachanka is bad now, you have no idea what old Tachanka was like. But still, somehow, Tachanka deserved respect, but not because he was good. Old Tachanka was a meme, a joke, a testament to bad design and community irony. Because back in the day, Tachanka's ability was so bad that he was revered as a god, and his entire existence as an operator was made a joke because of it. Lord Tachanka. He was arguably the operator with the most aura because people were jokingly making that the case due to him being so incredibly terrible. To see what I mean, let's take a look at his actual ability. Back in the day, Tachanka's ability was just having an LMG that you couldn't move, that was stationary. That's literally it. It's the same LMG, by the way, that right now you get as a part of your base loadout, and you're also able to move and carry in your hands. Setting up a static mounted LMG, which is what he had back then, in a game filled with destructible walls and ceilings that the LMG could destroy, you might as well have been painting a target on your forehead. You couldn't couldn't rotate, you couldn't react quickly, everything was clunky, and everyone, I mean everyone, knew exactly where you were once you fired because of how loud this LMG was and still is to this day. Considering that most of the meta back then when Tachanka was memed on was bunkery and people sat on site, an ability that opened up the entire bomb site not only was completely useless but actually hindered your team more than it helped. Not only this, but attackers could also use your gadget, meaning that if you died and site was taken, the attackers could just use what you had set up. He was so unusable, so completely irrelevant that he became Lord Tachanka, a joke pick celebrated by the community for his sheer uselessness. It wasn't until his full rework years later in Operation Shadow Legacy that Tachanka finally became a semi-viable defender. But old Tachanka, he was basically free points for the enemy. Even Tachanka now, after the rework, suffers from what Old Grim did on his release. Considering how badly we talked of Old Grim on release, you probably already can think of how bad Tachanka is now. Tachanka's fire launcher right now, just like Grim, is slow, uncomfortable to use, not at all useful in the first place, and leaves you open to be killed. Just like Grim, he's hard to use for very little reward. Now, there are some certain situations where Tachanka can be good. Take the Basement of Bank, for example, when area denial is pretty much the only way you can win on the bomb site. Or maybe if you watch enough Macy J videos and you can figure out some crazy lineups that are useful once in every 20 games. There are some little niche scenarios where Tachanka can be good, but other than that, he is one of the worst defenders in the entire game of Rainbow Six Siege.
Real gingers on top level.
Oh my god, he pushed it! That was 7 of the most useless operators in Rainbow Six Siege history. That's it for today's video. Check out this next video on your screen.